There is something living inside your mind at this very moment, and it is working against you. You cannot see it. You cannot touch it. But every single day, it shapes the choices you make, the opportunities you ignore, and the life you quietly settle for. And what makes it so dangerous is that you believe it is protecting you. It is not protecting you. It is imprisoning you. One cautious decision at a time, one safe choice after another, year after year. I spent the better part of my life studying success. I interviewed and observed some of the most accomplished men and women of my era. I searched for the principles that separated those who built extraordinary lives from those who spent their years wishing they had. And I will tell you something that surprised even me. The greatest obstacle to success was almost never a lack of money, education, or opportunity. The greatest obstacle was always a set of beliefs lodged so deeply inside the mind that the person carrying them did not even know they were there. These beliefs feel like truth. They feel like common sense. They feel like wisdom handed down by people who love you, but they are not wisdom. They are silent poisons disguised as protection. And until you identify them, confront them, and remove them completely, they will hold you prisoner in a life far smaller than the one you were meant to live. Today, I want to walk you through 7 of these destructive beliefs, not theories, not guesses. These are patterns I observed again and again across decades of research into the minds of both successful and unsuccessful people. These beliefs touch everything: how you think about money, how you approach risk, how you see yourself, and what you believe is possible for your future. I will be direct with you. Some of what I am about to share will be uncomfortable. Some of these beliefs are ones you have held so long they feel like part of who you are. Removing them will feel like pulling a nail from old wood, but that discomfort is the price of freedom, and I promise you, the freedom is worth it. Let us begin. And I urge you to listen carefully, because the belief doing the most damage is often the one you are most certain is true. The first belief you must delete from your mind is this: I will start when I am ready. I cannot tell you how many men and women I have watched waste years of their lives waiting for this feeling of readiness that never arrived. They told themselves they needed more preparation, more savings, more knowledge, more confidence. They were always getting ready to get ready, and while they waited, their lives passed them by. I want you to understand something I learned early in my research. Readiness is not a condition you achieve. It is not a finish line you cross. It is a feeling, and feelings by their very nature are unreliable. They change with your mood. They shift with your energy. They rise and fall with the weather of your emotions. And fear, which is the most cunning enemy of progress, has learned to disguise itself perfectly as preparation. Think carefully about your own life. How many times have you told yourself you needed to learn just a little more before you began? How many books have you read? How many plans have you drawn up? How many conversations have you had about what you intend to do someday? And all the while, the thing you actually needed to do sat untouched. That is not caution. That is fear wearing the mask of responsibility. Throughout my years of study, I found one truth that never varied. The men and women who achieved great things did not wait for confidence to arrive before they acted. They acted first, and the confidence came after. They started with incomplete plans. They moved forward with half-formed ideas. They began while their hands were still shaking and their doubts were still loud. And in the doing, they discovered strengths they never knew they had. This is the principle I came to call definiteness of purpose in action. It is not enough to have a desire. You must couple that desire with a decision to move, and that decision must come before you feel comfortable. Because if you wait for comfort, you will wait forever. Every week you spend preparing to start is a week someone else is using to build momentum. And once momentum begins, it generates its own power. It creates opportunities you could never have planned for. It attracts people and resources that would never have found you while you sat still. So delete this belief entirely. Replace it with something far more powerful. I will begin now and refine as I go. That single shift in thinking has separated the builders from the dreamers for as long as success has been studied. But the next belief I need to share with you is even more deeply rooted, and nearly everyone carries it without question. The second belief you must delete is this: money is hard to make. Before you resist this, I want you to ask yourself an honest question. Where did this belief come from? Did you arrive at it through your own careful experience and experimentation? Or was it handed to you piece by piece when you were too young to examine it? For most people, this belief was planted in childhood. It came from watching parents argue about bills. It came from hearing words like, "We cannot afford that," spoken so often that they stopped being sentences and became a worldview. It came from phrases repeated like prayers in a church of limitation. Money does not grow on trees. Rich people are greedy. People like us do not get ahead. And over time, those phrases did something very specific to the mind. They became what I have described as autosuggestion, the process by which repeated thoughts sink into the subconscious mind and begin to operate as commands. Your conscious mind may have forgotten those childhood phrases long ago, but your subconscious mind recorded every one of them, and it is still obeying them today. This is why the belief that money is hard to make is so devastating. It does not just sit passively in your thoughts. It actively shapes your behavior. When you believe money is scarce and difficult, you do not negotiate your pay because you feel lucky to have any income at all. You do not invest because you assume the system is designed to take from people like you. You do not pursue opportunities because deep inside, you have already decided they are not meant for you. But I want you to consider a different perspective. Money is not hard to make. Money is hard to make when you do not understand how it works. Those are two entirely different statements. One describes a permanent condition of the universe. The other describes a temporary gap in your knowledge. And gaps in knowledge can be closed by anyone willing to study. Throughout my research, I observed the same principle operating in the lives of every wealthy person I studied. Money flows toward value. It always has. It always will. If you can solve a problem that other people care about, if you can reduce their pain, save their time, improve their results, or deliver something they genuinely need, money will move in your direction. This is not theory. This is the way commerce has worked since the first human traded one thing of value for another. But you will never see this clearly while the old belief sits in your mind like a wall between you and the truth. The person who believes money is hard to make does not look for ways to create value. They look for reasons to confirm their belief, and they always find them because the mind is remarkably skilled at finding evidence for whatever it already believes. Here is what I want you to do. Begin today to change the instructions you are giving your subconscious mind. Every time the old thought appears, money is hard to make, replace it deliberately with a new thought. Money flows to those who learn to create value for others. Say it to yourself in the morning. Say it again before you sleep. Write it where you will see it. This is not foolishness. This is the practical application of autosuggestion, the same method used by every person I studied who rose from poverty to prosperity. At first, it will feel mechanical. You will not believe it. That is normal. The old belief had years to take root. The new one needs time and repetition. But if you persist, something remarkable will happen. Your subconscious mind will begin to accept the new instruction. And once it does, you will begin to notice opportunities that were invisible to you before. Not because those opportunities are new, they were always there. You simply could not see them through the wall of your old belief. Now, the third belief may surprise you. It is one that most people wear like a badge of honor, and that is precisely what makes it so dangerous. The third belief you must delete is this: I just need to work harder. I know this sounds wrong to you. Everything you have been taught says that effort is the answer to every problem, and I want to be clear. I am not dismissing the value of effort. Self-discipline and persistent action are at the very foundation of every achievement I have ever studied. But there is a critical difference between effort and effectiveness, and I have watched that difference ruin promising lives. Let me explain what I mean. I have known men who worked 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, for decades, and never escaped poverty. I have also known men who worked far fewer hours but directed their effort with such precision that they built fortunes. Were the second group lazy? Not at all. They had simply learned something the first group had not. They understood that effort without organized planning is like steam without a boiler. It makes noise, it creates heat, but it moves nothing. This is what I came to call organized planning, and without it, even the most tremendous willpower produces very little. The man who digs with great passion in the wrong location will never strike gold, no matter how many hours he spends digging. But the man who takes the time to study the ground, to analyze where the vein of gold is most likely to run, and then focuses his effort on that precise spot, he is the one who breaks through. I have watched this pattern repeat itself hundreds of times. A person works desperately hard, they exhaust themselves, and when success does not come, they blame themselves for not working hard enough. So they push even harder in the same direction, the same methods, the same approach, the same results, and the cycle continues for years, sometimes for an entire lifetime. The belief that harder is always better keeps people from asking the questions that would actually change their situation. Not, how can I work more hours? But what is the highest value activity I can direct my effort toward? Not, how can I do everything myself? But where am I wasting energy on tasks that produce little return? What you need is not more effort. What you need is leverage. Leverage is the ability to achieve the greatest possible result from each unit of effort you invest. It is the difference between pushing a boulder up a hill with your bare hands and using a lever to move it with a fraction of the force. Delete the belief that working harder will save you. Replace it with this principle. I must direct my effort with precision toward the activities that produce the greatest results. That is where true progress begins, and that is the lesson that separates those who merely work hard from those who actually get ahead. What I want to share with you next goes even deeper. This fourth belief quietly poisons the mind in ways most people never recognize. The fourth belief you must delete is this: wealthy people are just lucky or dishonest. I understand why this belief exists. I have compassion for the people who hold it. When you look at someone who has built great wealth and you compare their situation to your own, the gap can feel enormous. It can feel unjust. And the most natural response, the one that protects your sense of self, is to tell yourself a story that explains the gap without requiring you to change anything. They were born into it. They got lucky. They cut corners. They knew the right people. And yes, advantages exist. I have never denied that. But here is what this belief does to the person who holds it. It removes their power completely. It says that the game is decided before you play it, so there is no reason to step onto the field. And once a person stops trying, the belief becomes its own proof. See, they say, I knew it was impossible, but it was not impossible. They simply stopped before they started. After decades of studying both wealthy and impoverished minds, I can tell you with certainty that the vast majority of lasting fortunes are built through a specific combination of qualities: a burning desire for a definite objective, the discipline to save and invest consistently over time, the faith to persist through setbacks that would stop ordinary people, the willingness to delay small pleasures for large rewards, and the habit of surrounding oneself with minds greater than one's own, what I have always called the mastermind principle. None of these require luck. None of these require dishonesty. They require only a made-up mind and the patience to see it through. Let me say a word about the mastermind principle, because it is so often overlooked. The most successful people I studied almost never built their wealth alone. They formed alliances with other sharp, determined, resourceful minds. They understood that two minds working in harmony produce a third force, an intelligence greater than either one alone. This is not networking in the shallow modern sense. This is the deliberate creation of a circle of minds united by a common purpose, and it is available to anyone. You do not need wealth to form such an alliance. You need only a clear purpose and the willingness to give as much value as you receive. But here is what concerns me most about this particular belief. When you hold it, you stop studying wealth. You stop learning how money actually grows. You stop paying attention to the principles that have created prosperity for centuries. And that willful ignorance becomes the true reason you stay where you are. The belief creates the very condition it claims to describe. I urge you to delete this belief completely. Replace it with this understanding. Wealth is built through specific habits, decisions, and principles that are available to anyone willing to learn and apply them. The moment you accept this, something shifts inside you. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstance and begin to see yourself as a student of success. And that shift changes everything. The fifth belief you must delete is this: It is too late for me. I have heard every version of this belief you can imagine. I am too old. I missed my chance. That window has closed. Young people have all the advantages now, and every single time I hear it, I feel a deep sadness, not because the person is right, but because they are surrendering to a lie they have mistaken for reality. Let me put this to you simply. How old will you be in 5 years? You will be exactly the same age whether you begin today or whether you spend those 5 years sitting still. Time is going to pass. That is beyond your control. The only thing within your control is what you do with the time you have left, and you have more of it than you think. Throughout my studies, I found example after example of men and women who did not begin their greatest work until well past the age when most people assume life is winding down. People who started businesses in their 50s. People who learned entirely new skills in their 60s. People who made their most important contributions to the world at an age when society expected them to sit quietly and watch. And consider this carefully. You know things today that you did not know 20 years ago. You understand people better. You understand problems better. You have experienced failure and survived it. You have accumulated what I consider one of the most valuable resources in the world, the wisdom that only comes from living. These are not disadvantages. These are extraordinary assets. The younger version of you had energy but lacked the judgment you now possess. Do not throw that judgment away. The belief that it is too late is nothing more than fear using your calendar as evidence. It points to your age and says, see, the proof is right there. But your age is not evidence against you. It is simply the starting point from which your next chapter begins. I want you to consider something else. Many of the greatest achievements in history were accomplished by people who had already lived enough life to understand what truly mattered. Youth has energy, yes, but energy without wisdom is just motion. The person who has lived through failure and disappointment and loss carries something the young person does not yet possess, an understanding of what is worth pursuing and what is not. That understanding is not a burden. It is a compass, and a compass is worth more than all the speed in the world if it saves you from running in the wrong direction. I want you to delete this belief forever. Replace it with this conviction. I have more wisdom, experience, and perspective than I have ever had. The best time to begin was years ago. The second best time is this very moment. And then act on it. Because 5 years from now, you will be either deeply grateful that you started or deeply regretful that you did not. And there is no third possibility. But stay with me, because there is still one more belief ahead that may be doing more damage than all the others put together. And after that, I will share the final belief that ties everything together. The sixth belief you must delete is this. I need to avoid failure at all costs. Of all the beliefs I have studied, this one has quietly killed more dreams than perhaps any other. More than laziness, more than lack of resources, more than bad timing. The fear of failure operates like an invisible hand pressing down on the lives of millions of people, and most of them do not even feel it because they have grown so accustomed to its weight. When you believe that failure is something terrible, something to be avoided and ashamed of, you begin to make every decision based on what is safe rather than what is right. You take the secure job over the exciting opportunity. You keep your ideas locked inside your mind instead of testing them in the world. You remain in circumstances that have grown comfortable but lifeless, because at least you are not failing. At least no one can point at you and say you tried and fell short. But I want to tell you something I discovered through decades of careful observation. Every single person who has ever achieved anything worth remembering has failed. Not once, not occasionally, repeatedly. And those failures were not detours on the road to their achievement. Those failures were the road itself. They were the education that no book could provide. They were the strengthening that no preparation could substitute for. This is the principle of persistence in its truest form. Persistence does not mean you never fall. It means you develop the habit of getting back up. And each time you rise, you are stronger, wiser, and closer to the goal than you were before. Consider a very simple example. A child learning to walk falls down constantly, dozens of times, hundreds of times, and yet not a single person watching that child says, perhaps walking is not meant for you. We understand instinctively that falling is part of the process. The muscles grow stronger through the falling and the rising. The balance develops through the stumbling. Achievement works by exactly the same principle. Every failure teaches you something that success could not. Every setback reveals what does not work, which brings you closer to discovering what does. But this only happens if you continue. If you give up at the first failure, or the second, or the fifth, you walk away just when the lesson was about to arrive. The most successful people I studied throughout my career did not fail less than others. They often failed more, but they treated failure differently. They saw it as information, not as identity. They saw it as feedback from reality, not as punishment from fate. And that single difference in perspective gave them the courage to continue when everyone around them would have quit. I have always taught that every adversity carries within it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. But you must stay in the game long enough to discover that seed. And the belief that failure must be avoided at all costs is the very thing that pulls people out of the game before the seed has had time to grow. Delete this belief. Remove it entirely from your mind. Replace it with this understanding. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the tuition I pay for success. Carry that conviction with you, and you will become nearly impossible to stop. Now, we have come to the seventh and final belief, and I saved it for last deliberately, because in many ways it is the foundation upon which all the other false beliefs rest. If you can remove this one, the others lose much of their power. The seventh belief you must delete is this: my circumstances determine my future. This is the belief that says your history has already written your destiny, that where you were born, what family you came from, what happened to you in your early years, all of that has drawn an invisible boundary around what is possible for your life. And no matter what you do, you cannot cross that boundary. I understand why so many people hold this belief. When you grow up in poverty, the world seems designed for people who already have money. When you come from a family that struggled, struggle begins to feel like an inheritance you cannot refuse. When life has dealt you hardship after hardship, it becomes tempting to conclude that hardship is simply your lot. But this belief, as understandable as it is, represents the greatest theft a person can commit against themselves, because it takes the most powerful force you possess, the power of your own mind and your own decisions, and hands it over to the past. It says that what was done to you matters more than what you choose to do next. And I can tell you with absolute conviction, after a lifetime of study, that this is wrong. Your circumstances are your starting point. They are not your destination. That distinction is everything. Your starting point is something that happened to you. Your destination is something you create through the quality of your thoughts, the firmness of your decisions, and the consistency of your habits. I have seen people begin with nothing, not a dollar, not a connection, not a single advantage the world could recognize, and build lives of remarkable achievement. I have also seen people begin with every privilege imaginable and squander it all. The difference was never the starting point. The difference was always the mind, the beliefs they carried, the definiteness of their purpose, the burning desire that drove them, the faith they placed in their own ability to create a different outcome. And let me be clear, this is not empty optimism. I am not asking you to pretend that problems do not exist or that disadvantages do not matter. I am asking you to recognize a practical truth that has been demonstrated throughout human history. The person who believes their circumstances are permanent will act as though they are permanent. They will not try, they will not invest, they will not learn, they will not take risks, and their life will reflect those choices exactly. But the person who looks at their circumstances and says, "This is where I am, but it is not where I intend to stay," that person will act differently. They will study, they will plan, they will persist, they will seek out knowledge and allies and opportunities. And over time, different actions will produce different results. Not because of luck, not because of magic, but because of the immutable law that says your outer world eventually conforms to your inner world. The thoughts you hold in your mind, the beliefs you accept as true, the images you dwell upon day after day, these are the blueprints from which your future is being constructed. If the blueprint says, "I am limited by my past," then the structure of your life will reflect that limitation. But if you have the courage to tear up that blueprint and draw a new one that says, my past is my starting point, my decisions are my destination, then you set in motion forces that the old version of you could never have imagined. Delete this belief. It has held you long enough. Replace it with this: where I began does not determine where I finish. My mind, my decisions, and my persistence determine that. And then live accordingly. Now, let me draw all of this together, because understanding these beliefs is important, but understanding alone changes nothing. What changes a life is the decision to act upon what you understand. I have shared 7 beliefs with you today, 7 invisible walls that keep millions of people trapped in lives far smaller than they were designed to live. Let me remind you of each one briefly so they are clear in your mind. The first, the belief that you must wait until you are ready, you will never feel ready. Begin now. The second, the belief that money is hard to make. Money is not hard to make. It flows to those who create value. Learn to create value, and money will find its way to you. The third, the belief that working harder is always the answer. Hard work without direction is wasted energy. Learn to direct your effort with the precision of organized planning. The fourth, the belief that wealthy people are simply lucky or dishonest. Wealth is built through habits and principles that anyone can study and apply. The fifth, the belief that it is too late for you. Time will pass whether you act or not. You possess wisdom and experience that your younger self never had. Use it. The sixth, the belief that failure must be avoided. Failure is not the enemy of success. It is the very process through which success is achieved. Stay in the game. And the seventh, the belief that your circumstances control your future. Your circumstances are your starting point. Your thoughts, your decisions, and your habits are what determine where you end up. These 7 beliefs are like chains. And the cruelest thing about chains you have worn for years is that they begin to feel like part of your body. You forget they are there. You mistake their weight for the natural weight of living. And so you never try to remove them. But now you see them, and seeing them is the beginning of freedom. I do not ask you to change everything tonight. I do not ask you to be perfect. I ask you only to do what the successful have always done. Examine the beliefs you carry, question the ones you have never questioned, and have the courage to discard any belief that is keeping you from the life you are capable of building. The quality of your beliefs determines the quality of your life. That is not a theory. That is a law I have seen confirmed in the lives of thousands of people, both the successful and the unsuccessful. The ones who prospered were not always the most talented. They were not always the most educated. They were not always the ones who started with the greatest advantages. But they were always, without exception, the ones who refused to let false beliefs govern their decisions. Your subconscious mind is extraordinarily obedient. Whatever belief you plant in it and nourish through repetition, it will accept as truth. And once it accepts a belief as truth, it will work day and night to make your outer world match that inner conviction. This is the power of autosuggestion. It works for you or against you. It builds you up or tears you down. And you are the one who decides which beliefs you feed it. So I ask you tonight to make a decision, not a wish, not a hope, a decision. Decide that from this moment forward, you will no longer carry beliefs that were never true. Decide that you will replace them with principles that have been tested and proven by the most successful minds in human history. Decide that your future will be shaped not by your fears, not by your past, not by the opinions of those who never tried, but by the power of your own disciplined, focused, purposeful mind. The world does not give you what you wish for. It gives you what you demand of yourself and what you are willing to persist toward with every ounce of your being. So demand more, believe more, act more, and never again allow a false idea to sit inside your mind unchallenged. I have seen what happens when a person finally lets go of the beliefs that have been holding them down. It does not happen all at once. It begins quietly. A new thought here, a bolder decision there. A moment of courage where there used to be hesitation. And then, slowly at first, and then with gathering speed, their entire life begins to change direction. Not because the world changed, but because they changed. And when you change, the world has no choice but to respond differently to you. Your future is not written, it is not sealed, it is waiting patiently for you to claim it. And that claiming begins right now, in this moment, with the beliefs you choose to carry forward and the ones you choose to leave behind. If this lesson has been of value to you, subscribe to Napoleon Mindset for more timeless principles of success and wealth.